Welcome back to the Reside Platform podcast. And I'm super excited because we got a special guest that we're interviewing today, and he's a big part of the Reside platform, and you're going to get a ton of value out of this. And it may not be the sexiest topic ever, but I guarantee this, the results will bring sexy to your life and luxury to your life and abundance to your life and overall wealth, whatever that is to you, wealth to you and the people in your community and the people you support. So we have Andy Mulholland. He's the owner of Simple Numbers, along with Ellyn, his wife. They co-founded that company, and they work with 100 top teams throughout North America. They work with every one of our clients at Reside, and they do the financial reporting for them. And Andy's special and Ellyn's special in terms of accounting and bookkeeping. And we're going to talk about the difference between accounting and bookkeeping, because he's one of us. Was a solo agent, and he's going to talk about that. He built a team, and he scaled the team to a level in which he could pull himself out of production. And then he did the unthinkable, and he exited the team. And in fact, he sold it or gave it away and did something even bigger for him and his family. And now he's coming back in the hero's journey to bring back the boon, bring back the wealth to all of you. And so you're going to want to take notes. You're going to want to share this episode. And so here we are, Andy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Nick. Good to be here.
So with that introduction, right, that you know, and I know you, we've known each other for probably a decade at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Give us a little background. Take us to that solo agent progression to team leader to selling it to where you are now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I started kind of the origins of it was my wife and I went through the Dave Ramsey financial peace process and paying off just a ton of debt and really transforming the way in which we view money and really seeing it as a tool to build wealth and not just a tool to something just to spend, to buy stuff or to change our immediate lifestyle. And so we went through that, and part of that was me getting a second job, and my second job was being a limousine driver. Used to drive doctors from the Mayo Clinic where I lived in Rochester, Minnesota, and drive them to the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport to grab a flight. Or I even did overnight drives where I would take doctors to harvest. This is kind of crazy. Harvest organs from other hospitals, and I'd wait for them while they did the surgery and bring those organs back for a heart or lung or liver transplant. And what was really crazy is my wife was a nurse at the time in the heart and lung transplant unit at Mayo. And so I would know ahead of time. I'd get a call at midnight or something and say, hey, you got to go. And I'd let her know, hey, you're going to have a heart or a lung coming. Like, get ready today because somebody's getting a transplant. So it was kind of just crazy that way. But we did that. We paid off debt. And all of a sudden, I had the opportunity to think about starting a business. And obviously, real estate, with the lower barrier of entry and the limited resources needed to get started, it was just an obvious choice for me. I had no idea if it was going to work or not. But luckily for me, it did. My first year, I think I sold 28 units, was Rookie of the Year for the MLS Association, things like that. And it was really just from hard work. I had a notebook full of all the people I was talking to. At that time, there was I think Top Producer was just coming out. Right? There were no follow-up campaigns, automated this, none of that. I literally had a desk phone, and I was calling out of the phone book, and I was doing open houses, and I was building a database on paper. And that quickly, I realized that was not going to work for long. So it invested in some cool technology like the CRM. And this was 2009, and grew it. And every year learned, okay, I've got to leverage myself with people and systems. And at the time, the person was an assistant for me, and the system was the CRM, and I just kept doing it. And all of a sudden, I could kind of delegate and elevate, and just grew it from there. Quickly realized, okay, the next level of delegation is to delegate these buyers off my plate, because the listing side is where I saw even more leverage. Obviously, when you list a home, other people sell it for you. When you work with a buyer, you got to go do the selling. And so that was an obvious next step for me. So brought in a buyer's agent, failed miserably, right? He didn't want to work. I assumed, like everybody, he was going to come in and just do what I did, and he didn't. And it frustrated me, and I fired him. Did it again, right? And luckily the next 2 or 3 stuck and started it, had this team. Realized that we needed more admin and just kind of built it like I think everyone does and leverage with people and systems. And got to the point where I was able to exit buyer production completely. It took about a year. Really focus on the listings and dial that in. And honestly, I went a little nuts with that process. I mean, did a lot of marketing to generate inbound seller leads, which was the bread and butter of my business, because of course those seller leads created more free low-cost buyer leads, which could then increase my profitability on the buy side of the business. I didn't have to pay for all these leads. So it was all about generating those inbound seller leads. And we did that through marketing and good follow-up systems. And, then built systems around leveraging myself in that role. So for example, I got to the point where I had inbound buyer seller leads consistently, an ISA to take those leads and set the appointments for me at predetermined times that I, told him, and in my office. So I never visited a seller's home before they signed a listing contract, which people gave me. So in my market, the word got out. It was a fairly small market. People did not like that. We pushed the envelope on other things back when coming soons were frowned upon. Now it's just kind of common, and all that stuff. But we pushed, and I built a highly leveraged listing side system in my business and was able to just drop another agent in place, teach them that system. They could show up to that pre-scheduled appointment, be good at converting that seller to a side listing, and then never touch the thing again until we had an offer on the table. The admin the listing coordinator handled everything else. And so first it was leveraging myself, then it was teaching another agent to do that. And with that, I could pay them a split that allowed me to make money on that listing side and really create the profit center there. I had an independent brokerage that I'd opened through that process as well, and left another larger brokerage that I was at for a few years. And that was one of the best moves I'd ever made in my business. It really gave me a lot of freedom to do what I needed to do. And really brand myself directly. And so that was it. Eventually hired a sales manager and an operations director that ran the day-to-day. And I was able to show up on Tuesdays, lead our L10 meetings, and kind of be the chief evangelist of our team.
Whoa.
And, enjoy that. But it did get to the point where I realized that, even in that place in my business, which was a great place, I was seeking something else, seeking something more, and that was even more time and freedom. And so it made sense for me to walk away from the business completely. And looking back on it, I think the reason I was fairly easily able to make that decision is because through that process, I learned that financials and the right economic model are the key to driving freedom in your life when it comes to running a business. You think of these business owners that literally they're not really business owners. They're just the people that own the place that they work. They own their own job. They're the boss of themselves, but they're still a slave to that role that they're in. And a lot of it comes back to almost every time I talk to people who are stuck in production, it's because of a financial dependency there, because they're not running a model that works necessarily.
And also on that financial model, they don't understand and they don't actually have an understanding of what's going on financially.
For sure.
So
they're not even looking at it. Yeah.
There's so much amazing things that Andy just said. I want to double click on a few of those things. And as we move forward, we're going to go through the 5 simple numbers for everyone here that you need to track for your financials. So that when you're done with this podcast, you know what you need to track. Because here's something about Andy. I don't know if you guys picked up on it yet. He was intentional with his business. He had the goal in mind, and I think the goal was profit. And beyond profit was a profitable model, a sustainable model, a scalable model that allowed him to remove himself, because he was seeking, is it true, Andy, you were seeking freedom, which was
100%.
To do what?
Spend time with the family.
Spend time with the family.
Yeah, we got 4 kids, and I remember when we had our first one, that's when it dawned on me, this has been fun. It was about a year after I started, wow, I've never made 6 figures in a year in my life. And I blew that out of the water in my first year. But it dawned on me that that was at a huge sacrifice. And so I said, I've got to build this differently and responsibly so that it doesn't just come with sacrificing that time freedom.
And usually that comes about, I mean, there's a couple things I want to say. He said, people and systems, and systems. That's what our business is about. You want to elaborate on people and systems. And then you also said delegate and elevate. These mantras guide us. They may not have been your core values on the Andy real estate team, but those are one of your core values. And you're still using those core values today, I bet, in simple numbers.
Yeah.
Who are the people? What are the systems? How do I delegate? How do I elevate myself to, as a CEO, a higher level? And I think as team leaders, we need to be thinking about those things too.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for me, when I think of people and systems, I think systems is the priority, and people to run those systems is the key. And so I think there's different ways to do this. There could be successful businesses that are run with A players. But I think too often we decide that we're going to build a business around A players leave, and our business falls apart. Where if we prioritize the system and then find people that have a culture fit, their culture fit like at the top, but they're not somebody who's they're not what we would maybe call an A player, meaning they're like the highest level skilled people that could go out and just blow it out of the water themselves. When we build a business dependent on them, I think we're putting ourselves in a pretty vulnerable position, unless we have so many of them in front of us that it's not as big of a deal. But that's hard to do, and it takes a lot of time. So for me, I never wanted a giant team. I wanted a small, tight-knit team that was leveraged through systems and marketing. I owned the marketing. I generated those opportunities through what I love to do, which is to create campaigns to generate those inbound leads, but then have systems in place that allowed us to not only convert those leads at as high level as possible, but provide the service to the customer that was consistent every day, no matter what agent or admin they were working with on my team, because the person ran the system. And I did have a lot of A players on my team, but I wasn't dependent on them. If they left, I just plugged someone right back in to run that system.
Well, there's a couple things to talk about here. And there's A players that require no systems. And a lot of times it's like, if I only had that person that can just do it, get it done on their own, that don't require a system. Those are those people. They're out there. They're high I's or high D's, get things done at all costs. Yeah. But like you said, they leave you and then you have nothing. You don't even have a system.
Or they're very expensive.
Or their
profit margin's not there. And you might get that freedom to be able to walk away because they can handle it, but you got to pay them such an amount where it's like, well, now I just sacrificed all my money to be able to walk away.
And I also believe this. I believe there's A players in terms of being able to follow a system. So that the same A player that requires no system, they're actually like a C player when it comes to following a system. Try to hold them accountable. Try to get them to report to you. They don't do it. But there's some players out there. They report like A players. They follow a system like A players. They follow checklists like A players.
It's so true. Maybe it's just that we have to redefine what that A player truly is.
And I never thought about that until this conversation.
Yeah.
And because we over exaggerate natural ability, like the person that can dunk from the free throw line with never having to practice. But we don't really value the person that set the screen that opened up Michael Jordan to go and dunk from the free throw line. The support players. If you look at the top players ever in the sports analogy, they always think the staff first, the ball boys, the people, because they understand who the true A players are. Now, I wanted to touch on pain for a second, because there's always this moment in real estate where sheer hard work and determination got you to where you are, but systems are going to take you to where you want to be. And it's usually a moment of clarity and pain. And for me, there was a year that I worked extremely hard, and I was getting a lot of fulfillment out of my hard work because I was getting sales. I like you, I sold 62 homes my fourth year. And something tragic happened to one of my family members, my wife, and it affected her deeply. And emotionally, I was not present. And it took me years to reflect on that, to notice that I wasn't there for her when she needed me emotionally the most.
Mm-hmm.
And because I don't remember anything, I was so hyper-focused on the goal, the mission, the business. And that was the wake-up call for me that, whoa, if that ever happens again, I don't want to be that person. I have to be present for my family. And that requires systems and a team and things like that. Was there a moment, we kind of talked about it, and you could share anything?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was a pretty distinct moment I remember. I'm sure there were others where I was reminded, but it wasn't a strong of enough gut reaction to it to make a change. And I'll be honest, I still struggle with it daily. Why? Because as humans, we're tempted to feel that if we perform, then we can feel valuable, or we create our identity in that. And so for me, it was riding in the car with my two sons, dropping them off at school. I think at the time, one was in second grade, one was in first. They're older now. But at that time, I was driving them to school. I only had 10, 15 minutes with them in the car every day. And then in the evenings, maybe some time as well. And this was me out of production, but still totally mentally and present in the business, not with them. And the phone rang as we were driving. My older son was trying to tell me something he was excited about at school. And I said, hold on, Noah, 1 second. I grabbed the phone and I could hear them in the background. I hear Grant, our younger son, telling Noah, don't bother him. What he's doing is more important. And I was just like, even like they're like 6 years old, and they see and they already understand that I value whatever it is I'm doing over time. And maybe I was blowing it out of proportion in that moment. Maybe that's not even what they meant. I don't know. But that was the instant it was like, okay, this doesn't work. My identity tied to the success or failure of this business doesn't work.
It's so impactful. And I'm sure people listening to that, if there's been moments in your life, and they're going to come in business. And so the reason I asked Andy to be on this podcast today is because I want to share I want to go over these 5 simple numbers, because understanding those and working towards them and having a financial system, a model that works, will allow those moments to be less, allow us to be more present.
Right. And this is a confusion I think I come across often as I've worked with people, because oftentimes I'll talk about the word profit, and it just has almost this negative connotation attached to it, because people think it's also tied closely to the word greed, right? And it's 100% not. In fact, in my opinion, you have a responsibility as an owner of a business to be as profitable as you possibly can be, not for shareholders and all those stuff, but for the people in your organization. I sure wouldn't want to work for somebody who's running along with razor thin margins, because they're so vulnerable to the marketplace that one change and I'm out of a job, right? So you owe it to those people in your community or in your organization to do that. Also, you owe it to the people that deserve you outside of your business, your family, whoever it is, because without profit, you won't find that freedom. And so I really think we need to, people think, well, Andy, you work with numbers, you must just be all about money. Actually, no, but I'm all about the tool that helps me find that freedom to do what I want, when I want, with who I want. And I think we should all be doing that. The problem is in the real estate industry, and there's maybe reasons for this, I get it, but we have to be very aware of it, is that we are rewarded not by profitability, but by production. And that is a very easy trap that gets sucked into, to get on stage, to be the one presenting, to do all these things because, hey, I hit this top line, when in reality, I'm a slave to my business. And I think that's what I want people to just be thinking about when they're really looking at their financials.
Let's talk. I want to dive deep into profit, because you're right. Because a lot of times people hear profit too, and they think sacrifice, frugality. In order for me to be profit, I have to sacrifice, I have to give up. I cannot go buy things. I have to cut expenses. I have to live below my means. And that's not necessarily true in business. You can grow your top line and grow your profitability. Now, here's the other thing. Here's how I look at profit too. One, safety and security for the people that I serve, and longevity. Now, if you want to attract A players and keep A players, they want to be with a company that's profitable. Period. Look at UPS drivers right now. They're getting paid handsomely because that company's profitable year after year after year. 170 grand per driver on average, right? That's a company you want to work for. And guess what? You're going to stay there for a long time. You think UPS has high turnover on their drivers? No. No.
They got a waiting list of drivers. Yeah.
And so my core business, just to take you my business, my operational staff, the ops, listing coordinators, transaction coordinators, salesmen, you know what our turnover is like year over year? 0. I mean, it's like nil, because they know that I'm a steward. I'm a fiduciary for the company. Now, here's the thing about profit I want people to think about. I want to get your thought on it. See profit as time in the future. That is storage of wealth, a resource for you to have freedom in the future. So that when you don't have profit, you don't have much time, you don't have much extra time in the future capacity or reservoir, right? And I think when you start looking at it that way, it's like the more profit I have, the more future time I have that I get to choose what I want to do with. Is that who I want, when I want, with whom when I want, or is it reinvesting in the company, right? Is it, what?
Yeah, it's options for sure.
It's options.
Yeah.
It's options. And so companies with less profit have fewer options.
Maybe it's options and opportunity for other people on your team, options for you, right? And I think that a healthy company has both.
Wow, I never thought of it as options. You're right. It's options and opportunities. So let's take them into the 5 simple numbers.
This came from years of doing it the wrong way. Number one, not even looking at my financials till the end of the year. And then when I did look at them, just being confused and making no sense, and then being very frustrated, thinking I made more, or sometimes being surprised that I made more than I thought, but I was wondering where the money was. Just total frustration over it, which sometimes led me to just go, well, I just got to go sell more. And that's not the answer. So really there are 5 numbers, and I think as business owners, we need to be very clear about. But I think before we get into the 5, we need to remember there are 2 distinctive ways in which we look at our books, right? One is from the lens of our CPA and the IRS, and that's all about taxes and really making sure that we decrease our tax liability in our business. And we should be doing that. We should be working with the CPA to do that. However, we can't stop there. There's a whole other side of the coin that we have to be looking at. This is where I think I failed for years to even bother to look at it. And that was, what is the numbers telling me about my business? That's that CFO, CEO interpretation of the numbers. And we're going to look at the books differently when we look at it from that perspective. There are 5 numbers. We call them the 5 simple numbers. Our business is simple numbers. We do books for people and break it down in this simplified fashion for them, as well as do the books so that their CPA can file their taxes. So we kind of can hit both sides. But when we look at it from the CFO standpoint, those 5 numbers start with the true total revenue. This is probably the number one mistake I see in most people's books, or at least right up there with a few others. And that is that they aren't truly looking at the top line revenue in their business. They're looking at what we call the gross profit, which is the amount that hits their bank account, right? After their agents and the broker take their portion, then they get paid. They're only looking at that number, and we're missing a lot of very important information if we don't, really truly look at the total revenue that comes into that business. So that's simple number 1. That kind of tells me where I'm at. What did I generate for revenue as a company? The second is what we would call costs of goods sold, or I like to refer to as costs of services provided, because in the real estate, we're not providing goods, we're providing services. But what was the cost for me to have one of my buyer's agents go out there and do a deal? Well, that's the split with that agent. What did I have to pay them? Because I didn't get that money as the team leader and owner. And I had to pay the broker a portion of that. Maybe I even had to pay an ISA a small portion of that. There might be some others I have to pay, maybe a referral to an outbound agent or something. But it is the cost of goods sold. And the mistake we can make around this one is that if we don't track it, and we don't look at it separately from the listing side to the buy side, and we don't separately look at the cost of the broker as a percentage of our revenue, we're not looking at that regularly, we can set up the wrong economic model, which will keep us in production. For me, here's where this hit home for me. I don't remember what year it was, but I think that year I sold about 100 units myself, had a couple of agents that were newer. I was just figuring out this team thing. They were doing buyer deals. I generated about $800,000 in revenue just from my 100 deals production. And my company made $600,000 in profit. And for me, it was just kind of an awakening that I was grateful for the profitability, but quickly realized that if I'm not careful with this thing, I will never be able to exit production, because if I didn't sell a deal, we would have lost $200,000 that year. So it was pretty staggering as far as the importance of me understanding my costs of goods sold, so that I don't end up just becoming a charity and paying for my agents to do deals. So that's costs of goods sold. That leaves us with the third number, which is very simply gross profit. That's what I have left. That's now the real revenue that hit my bank account, right? It's total revenue, number one, minus costs of goods sold, number two, equals gross profit, number three. It's what I have left. And the cool thing is there's only two things I have to do with this money. I've got to pay my bills and pay myself. And so that leads us to 4 and 5. Number 4 is our operating expenses. That's me paying my bills as a business owner. And so those operating expenses, we really like to keep these simple too. And everything should be broken down into one of 3 categories. There's 3 total categories. The first one is lead gen marketing. Any dollar I spend in my business with the intention of generating an opportunity for my team or myself is a lead gen marketing dollar, right? It could be branding, could be marketing, could be things like that, but it's some sort of lead gen and marketing dollar that is spent. The second category of operating expenses is people. This would be, any kind of salary or hourly pay that I'm paying to a staff person. This is not the splits with my agents, right? And I do see some teams make this mistake. So when we take over their books, what we will find is that they have their agent pay, their split under people expenses. It is not. That's a cost of goods sold, and we need to keep that separate. The third one is overhead, or some people call it G&A, general administrative. Like it is, and here's the best way to define it. It is any dollar that is spent in the business that wasn't a lead gen marketing dollar or wasn't a people expense. It's an overhead expense. Rent, office supplies, coaching, dues, things like that. So those are the 3 kind of main categories. Of course, within each of those categories, there are a lot of subcategories so we can track where the money's going. But those are the 3 main categories. And that leaves us with simple number 5, which is our net profit that hits that bottom line.
Or loss.
Yep.
Well, so those are the 5 simple numbers. And so I something popped in my head when I was listening. One is, any listener out there thinking, oh my gosh, how do I track all this stuff? That seems like a lot of tracking, right? And I want to simplify the tracking here for everybody. How do you, or whoever, whatever bookkeeper they hire, right? Andy, right. Simple numbers. You hire simple numbers. How do you make this easy for them?
Yeah, well, we just
answer, right, but like simplistically, how do you get access to this information and then deliver it to them?
Yeah, well, what's great is in today's world of technology, we can make it very simple for the business owner, right? So for us, we work exclusively with QuickBooks Online, and of course, that program syncs with bank accounts. And so we can see every time something is run through the business as an expense, every time a deposit is made. And because we're real estate exclusive, like we only work with real estate teams, that's all we work with. And some of their ancillary businesses that they may have, but our primary focus is those real estate team leaders and brokerage owners. We know what these expenses are. We can categorize them for you without even having to ask you, because we know what this stuff is.
Yeah, so I want to make this very clear for everybody. It is so simple as hiring Andy a simple numbers. And so now I'm not saying hire him, but what I'm saying is there's third-party authorization. They can get authorization not to transfer money, not to steal your money and go to Mexico, not to put it in a Swiss bank account. Security measures. They can see your every single thing you do, and you can go out there and sell real estate and build a business, and then every month or every week or whatever, they can report to you your numbers.
Yep.
And one of the most critical hires I ever made when I opened my company in 2012. We opened our brokerages about the same time, Andy.
Yep.
Is I hired a bookkeeper to do this for me with a chart of accounts. And I just assumed everyone did it. I just assumed that's what you do in business is you hire an accountant, you hire a bookkeeper. And then as a coach, you know, and you've coached people too, you get into other real estate teams and companies and you realize, whoa, you're running
Nobody's doing this.
Account. Nobody's doing this.
Yeah.
And it's shocking to me. And so that's why I wanted to have you on today is it actually is quite simple. Now,
yeah,
what Andy did for you was teach you what you're going to see and what to look at. And one of the numbers I wanted to talk about is gross profit with you. Again, that's the number that you have to pay yourself and your expenses. And that's after you pay your agents, it's after you pay your broker. To me, that's a really critical number because I want to know a couple things and I want to get your feedback on it. I want to know, how much do I really make every time I sell a listing? When I sell a listing and I pay my listing partner or my other agent, how much does the company retain? Company retained dollars. Versus, and also, how much do I make per buyer transaction? And that gives me a very clear number to know, okay, how many homes do I really need to sell to pay off my fixed cost, make my payroll, reinvest in new marketing expenses? So that, for me, that's really good planning purposes to figure out what it is that I need to do versus I just need to sell more homes, right? How many homes do I truly need to sell and how much am I making every time? Can you elaborate on that, how you think about cross?
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that, and that's a helpful, probably one of the most helpful things to know for planning purposes. I think the other mistake, or the thing that we got to be aware of, is that I think the mistake people make sometimes with this is that they don't have a plan around expenses. So they'll say, well, these just are my expenses, so therefore I'm going to reverse engineer to figure out how many homes I need to sell. That can work, but what if we don't sell that many homes? Then we're not hitting our margins that we're looking for. So the way that we always work with clients is to help them understand, reverse engineer it from the net profit. So I'll just say, Nick, how much money do you want to make? I want to make $1 million. Great. Are you in production or out? I'm out. Okay, great. So what percentage margin do we think that could be? Well, let's just say it's 10%. I want to make a 10% net margin, which is not a great margin, but let's just use it for mathematical purposes. It's easy to figure this out. We just work it backwards. Well, then that means you need to build a $10 million real estate top line company. And then that means we've got $9 million to go between cost of goods sold and expenses. How much we think is going to go to cost of goods sold? Probably 50%. So $5 million there. We have $4 million you can now go out and spend on stuff. So figure out how you're going to spend that. I think you break it down to those three categories, right? So we would spend $1.3 million in each category: people, marketing, and overhead. Now what we got to do, we divide that by 12. We know what our monthly budget is. Now we decide if we can go out and build a $10 million.
This is so good. This is so good. I was thinking about this before. There was a client of mine one time, you know, and he wanted a 30% net profit company to hit his income. So he's like, okay, I want to make $1 million, right? And 30% net profit, which means we could run the numbers that would tell you what your top line needs to be.
Yeah, it needs to be $3 million. $3
million. So you need to make $3 million top line in order to retain $1 million on the bottom line. Okay.
Right.
All right. Great. Awesome. Let's do it. How many homes is that? Perfect. Awesome. Great. Well, guess what? His agents were on 70-30 splits. Right. So I said, okay, so if you're not selling any of those homes and you're giving away 70%, you have 30% left over to pay.
Yeah, you have no money to spend anything on it. You can't. Right.
It's impossible. You will never hit it. You will never hit it because you've already given it all away. So I said,
right,
you need to figure out ways to add value to your agents so that they will be okay with a lower split. Right. Leverage your, like you're really good at this. And he's like, okay, how do I leverage my agents? How do I get a transaction partner? How do I change the comp plan?
Yeah, because we all know, and this is true for anything in life, is that the only time price, in this case, split is an issue in the absence of value. Your agents will only question your split if they think they can make more money in less time somewhere else. So it isn't about the split. It's not about the split. Now, on the surface, it seems like it's about the split because they can go down the road and find out better split. But that means it's our job to articulate the value to our people that we're looking to hire so that they understand how to make the kind of money they want with your splits. In fact, when we would hire people, we would not even talk about the split until we decided we were ready to hire them. But we would show them a path to $100,000 in their first year, and that's all they cared about, right? We will show you a path to $100,000 or $200,000 or whatever amount money they wanted to make, and that we could help them do that. And then we worried about the split.
Yeah, and not knowing your numbers makes that conversation in the recruiting process or the renegotiating process very, very hard.
Almost impossible. And then you end up hiring someone at the splits that you got the person to hire to join your team. For what purpose? Because you can't make profit if we have that wrong split model. And so, yes, I think that's why I like to work it backwards and really know what those percentages are, the margin, so I know what I can work with. And if it doesn't seem possible, if you just say, well, I can't offer those splits in my market based on that, well, then we need to readjust the net profit and say, well, we can't do 30. We can only do 15.
Let's look at the model. Look at the model. Yeah.
It's literally a pie. And we just need to split up that pie into these pieces. And there's really only three. There's profit is a piece of the pie. There is expenses is a piece of the pie. And then there's costs of goods sold. It's a 3-piece pie. The only question is how big each piece is going to be. And so that's what you got to figure out.
And that's where so a couple of things. One of the co-founders of Reside is John Sheplak.
Right.
And he works with, in our organization, work with the top teams, and he'll say they can always find a better split. Always. Unless you live in a marketplace that you don't have 100% brokerage offices, but there's 95.5s out there. There's 100% no fee brokerages. They're out there. So it's not about the split.
Right.
And then the other thing I want to bring up is we're running different models. So, Preston Guyton runs a different model than I run. Sydney runs a different model in California, right? A lot of our clients that reside that we're working with have different models because they're at different phases too.
Right.
Progressions, right? A $500,000 top line team is different than the $5 million top line team we're working with, or the $10 million top line team we're working with. And also, what do they want? Do they like listing homes? I had a client the other day. She's like, you know what, Nick? I love it. It's perfect. Let's build it into the model. You love it. How much do you love it? How much time how much energy do you want to exert on listings, right? Let's be intentional on that. Let's maximize your time to return on that, right? And so it's those little discussions that we have that are really exciting. Well, this has been awesome, Andy. How do people reach out to you?
Yeah,
how do they follow you? How do they?
Yeah, the best thing to do is just to visit our website. It's simple-numbers.com. They can find us on social media as well, Facebook things. But on that website, there's a lot of helpful training and tools. We have a tool called the 5-Minute Budget they can download for free and watch a 20-minute training video to help them put that economic model in place. It's a simple 1-page Excel form where they can put in a couple data points and create their monthly, quarterly, and annual budget right there. So that's available.
Yeah, and I always like to think about Mr. Pareto, the Pareto principle, right? The 20%, 80%, the 80-20 rule. 20% of agents make 80% of the commissions. The top 20% of teams make 80% of the team revenue out there, right? And I want to think about what are the real rocks? What are the real principles of the top 20%? Okay, I can tell you this because we coach teams, right? If you want to have a business in the top 20%, you got to have books, you got to have accounting, you got to have financial clarity. So purely the 0 to 1 moment from going not having it to having it is purely doing it. And then you're going to be in a position to be in the top 20%. I guarantee it. I promise you. This isn't the sexiest podcast we're ever going to do. But I promise you, when you go to Simple Numbers or you reach out and you understand money and profit and the mechanisms, it will be. It will be. Well, Andy, it's been awesome. If you guys like this podcast, share it, like it, comment, subscribe. You can also find this Reside platform on YouTube if you want to watch the video. So
thanks, Nick.
Man, it's been
Thanks
awesome.
for having me. Yeah, good to talk to you.